Okay, anytime you're ready.
We're in.
Well, hello again, everybody. I'm Chuck Offenberger, a board member for the Greene County Historical Society, and with me is my co-host this year for the History Chats, Don Van Gilder. Good morning, Don.
Good morning, Chuck.
We are back for our third History Chat at the Greene County Fair. This is something the Historical Society has been doing for 7 years here. The veteran host, co-host with me was Jerry Roberts, who died earlier this year, and after that I asked Don if he would jump in, and he knows Greene County history very well, having lived it, so he's jumped aboard this year, and we've really had great discussions and look forward to 2 more here today. Our special guest this morning and our topic this morning is Greene County sports, all of them, all time. The whole history of all the sports that have been played in Greene County. It's one of my favorite discussions we have out here. Usually we have Doug here every second or third year, and it's just been great to hear these stories, and there's particularly one I'm especially fond of. But let's welcome Doug Rieder as our special resource person here today from KGRA Radio. I know the quick biography would be Van Horn.
At the high school in Van Horn, in that community. I'm from Newhall, Iowa, which is also the home of the 1927 Girls State Basketball Championship team, which has a Hall of Famer on it that is Doug Lawton's grandmother.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I can't remember her first name. Boddicker.
Luella.
Boddicker, that's right, from Doug's hometown. Newhall, and then as you were going through high school, were you getting into sports casting, sports writing, any kind of sports connection?
I was a very poor athlete, and so I have the arthritic neck to prove it. I was a really bad wrestler, bridging all the time. I could tell you how many lights were in the Eastern Iowa Gymnasium 50 years ago. And a bad football player as well, crashing heads all those years. Really bad baseball player. I did hit for my career triple digits, an even 100 batting average.
There you go.
That's a bad batting average, by the way. 100. It's very bad. Hey, Chris. And yeah, I always wanted sports. When I was 12 years old, my dad was a town mechanic at the Chevy garage in Newhall. When I grew up, had 500 or 600 people. And so he worked no air conditioning in those days in the Chevy garage, and he'd sweat his what off. And then at night, he'd probably stop at Wally's Tap in Newhall and have a cold one or two, and sometimes they wouldn't let him out of there. But when they did let him out of there, he'd come home, eat supper, and then go out the 3 steps to our garage, at our back door, and work in his lawnmower shop till well after I went to bed. So we always had good new lawnmowers, and so that was our job, my 2 older sisters and I used my lawn mowing money when I was 12 to buy a tape recorder.
Oh, wow.
So I could turn the sound down on our small black and white television that had perhaps 1 college football game and maybe 1, if you're lucky, 2 college basketball games broadcast on a Saturday. I turned the sound down. Of course, there was no internet. I didn't have rosters. I didn't know anybody was. I just screamed play-by-play into the tape recorder. Number 12 passes number 3, shoots, he scored. It was horrible. But since I've been 12, I've wanted to be a radio sports play-by-play announcer. I'll soon be 66, and I am a sports radio play-by-play announcer. So I consider myself very fortunate. And I'm doing what I wanted to do since I was a kid. I'm still able to do it. You haven't kicked me out yet. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So that's how I got going.
And then what about college? I think, did you do Iowa Central?
Yeah, I went to Iowa Central. They had a radio broadcasting program.
Is that what brought you over there?
Yep. Yeah, I'd never been to Fort Dodge. Fort Dodge is like 1,000,000 miles away from Newhall. And my mom and she took off work from the Newco elevator in Newhall, Iowa. That was a big deal. And you and your parents understand. You took a day off work, drove me to Fort Dodge. We looked at the broadcasting program, and I enrolled there. And when I began, they had one brand new building on campus, big 3-story, beautiful building. And we went about middle of August. And the thing I remember most is there were no windows in the building that you could see out of, all brick. And it was so new, when we started class, the air conditioning didn't work. That's what I remember the most. Because I sweat bending over. So, it was miserable. I went back to Iowa Central a couple years ago, and that's the one building still on the campus from when I went there almost 50 years ago, is that building. So it's the antique now, but it was brand new when I went.
Did you, and were there many radio broadcast programs like that at schools at that time? I mean,
I don't think there were very many. Brown Institute in Minneapolis
John,
was probably
do you
the most
Yeah, I
famous
remember
one.
Brown in Minneapolis.
yeah.
Iowa, University of Iowa had one that was 4 years. And we just, money, and just didn't think needed 4 years. And I didn't need 4 years. But I would have liked to have gone 4 years to have 2 more years of fun.
Yeah,
But
sure.
in terms of education for small market radio, I didn't need more than
I guess I don't know this. When you got the job here, who did you hire on with the Bee and Herald?
No. So my first radio job in 1976 was at KJAN in Atlantic,
Oh yes, I do.
the voice of the Nishnah Valley, as they were at that time. We had, when we gave weather forecasts, we couldn't just say, here's the weather forecast. We had to say from the KJAN weather tower. We had a weather tower.
Really?
And not really. My oldest sister and brother-in-law at that time lived in eastern Nebraska. So during the day, it was AM, FM. The AM, they could get when it was on full power during daytime hours. So once in a while, they'd listen to my airship. And they came to visit me one time, and my brother-in-law, when he got to Atlantic, he had to see the weather tower. He wanted to see the weather tower. So the weather tower is a box that was about this high off the ground that had a thermometer inside it. That was the weather. He was so disappointed.
I always remember KJAN radio. The first thing I think of was the owner was Bob Einhaus,
Yeah,
and I got to know him over the years.
Great guy.
But what I was fascinated with particularly, other than that, I was also from Shenandoah, so KJAN was covering our games with Atlantic all
Sure.
the time. And but KJAN radio had a morning talk show called The Worry Bird,
Yes.
and it was distinctive because it was a one-way talk show. So the host, Bob Einhaus, is on the phone talking to listeners who didn't want to be on the air. That had just become the tradition there. And then he's repeating the question, kind of, and then answering the question.
there'd be dead air all over the place.
Yeah, it was
It
hilarious.
was
The Worry Bird.
hugely popular.
Yes, it was.
Hugely
Uh,
popular.
so, and then how long were you in Atlantic?
2 years, 1 year back in Fort Dodge at KWMT and KKAZ. And I wanted to get into sales, and they did not have any sales opening in that KJN, so they did at KWMT and KKAZ, so that's why I left. Really liked Atlantic, but try to further the career. I was there not quite a year. My boss was Tom Carmody, the late Tom Carmody, and Tom opened the KDLS Jefferson studio here in 1962. So Tom calls me in our office one day and says, there's an opening in Jefferson, and it's news and it's sports play-by-play, and it's selling, and I think you ought to apply. So I did. And that
Was he from Fort Dodge?
no, Tom.
Or where was his headquarters then? Was he in?
Well, at that time he lived in Fort Dodge. I can't remember where his hometown was.
No, but was he at the station in Perry? Or who owned the station here then?
Well, it was the Whitehead family who owned the
Oh, yeah, okay.
newspaper.
Sure.
And then there were some minority owners, but they were the majority owner.
Got it.
But yeah, Tom Carmody he was the manager here.
So then you came as the news guy, sports guy, sales, and then when did your association with the Bee and Herald start?
1993.
Oh, so that was much later.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were in radio from 79 to 93 here.
I
And
was
then-
both for 19 years, I think.
Wow. When you look back on that, when you
I'm
were
not
doing-
very smart.
when you were when you were doing that, both of them, the
Yeah.
newspaper, and also as at the time, for much of it, you were the editor of the Glidden Graphic, right?
Yeah, that came after KDLS.
Okay. How did you get all that done in that time period is my question.
I have no idea. Oh, it's like all of us. We have things we have to get done, and we get them done. We don't watch the clock. We don't. I never try and figure out how much an hour I make. You don't do that. Just do your job, and things will take care of themselves. Serve the client first, serve your employer second, and if you do those things correctly, you'll be taken care of. And I found that to be true throughout my career.
So 79 to 93 at KGRA.
Well, it was KDLS then.
KDLS.
Yeah.
And then, but here, you were here.
I was here, and in '94, went to KGRA, through late '97. I got out of radio full-time, briefly, was a New York Life agent for 5+ years, still did in sports. And then, being in Herald Sports was '93 through, I think it was 2012, I think. And then, I worked at the Glidden Graphic from '03 to '12, went back full-time radio with KG98, 12, so next month in August it'll be 10 years since I've been back full-time with everything.
And then throughout that time period, you had the Ram wrap-up show on cable television, right?
Yeah.
And how long have you done that?
1985, and I think we did it every week, every year, till about, not sure, 6 or 7 years ago maybe.
Okay.
We do some now, we just don't do it every week, every month, every year.
So what was let's go to the sports scene in Greene County. What did you think when you got here and you started dipping into sports here and broadcasting? What was the scene like in Greene County then?
I thought it was great because of my first real play-by-play opportunity in Atlantic. I was the color guy in high school football for the Atlantic Trojans, who were quite good. And they made the playoffs my first year there in '76. '77, they didn't make the playoffs, but Audubon did. Audubon lost to Emmitsburg in the title game in 1977 in the Unidome, the Class 3A state title game.
Whoa.
Audubon lost to Emmitsburg.
In
Audubon
3A.
In 3A. Emmitsburg's a 1A now, and Audubon is 8 player. And Audubon beat Fairfield and Urbandale to get to the state title game.
Wow. It's amazing change.
It's hilarious. Hilarious. Which leads me to this. So East Greene boys basketball team went to state in 1982. They were good. Ken Randall, Greg Tiffany, Mark Monty, Jerry Holbrook, Mark DeMoss, Bill Heyman, and Jim Kennedy, and Alan Slight, Mark Tolsdorf, Ken Countryman, Mike Tolsdorf, Bill Davis, great team. I was looking through this last night, and I made a note because this is Class 1A, 1982, 40 years ago. The other 7 teams in 1A that made the boys state tournament that year in basketball. Central City, who beat East Greene in the first round. Buffalo Center Rate, Ogden, Paulina, Mason City Newman, Decatur Central, Waukee.
Oh my goodness. Amazing. What a change those the stories represent. That's amazing. Dave.
Didn't Glidden have a good basketball team right about that time also?
Yeah, Dave Schoen was their star, 6'6"-ish.
I remember a game in the Jefferson
In our gym.
Where East Greene beat. Was that correct?
Yeah, probably right. That was probably slightly after this.
Yeah, beat Glidden.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Or maybe
I
Glidden
remember
won.
being
I
that.
don't remember.
Yeah, I
remember there were 2 good
doing
teams.
the game. Yeah, they were very good. That's right. Yeah, one of the Schoens, I think it was Dave, was the star, was the big man, very, very good.
I want to jump forward
Yeah.
to something, and then I think it's been 3 years, that throw in a COVID year, but I think it's been 3 years since we've had you here for a history chat.
Okay.
So in those 3 years,
Feel like Louis Armstrong. Are you old enough to know who he is? Saxophone?
in the 3 years, has there been anything in this time period that's been truly, that you would rank as truly historic in sports in Greene County?
Well, for me, yes. I don't know about for anybody else, but the Seabolt Wrestling Academy moving here in the summer of 2020, pretty big deal. I know not everyone follows wrestling, but TJ Seabolt has a reputation as one of the top. So it's a club, you have to pay to belong to it. And it's an all year long wrestling club, multiple times a week. You have to not only pay money, but most of the time you have to drive. Your family has to sacrifice time and effort and money and so on. Well, TJ's considered one of the top club coaches in the country, in the United States. So we have two young men who qualified. There's a big tournament right now in Fargo, North Dakota. It's U.S. Marines, 1600 junior nationals. They just call it Fargo. If you're a wrestling person, you know what Fargo Nationals means. And McKinley Robbins is there now. He's wrestling tomorrow. He'll be a senior at Greene County High. And Cale Peterson qualified, but Cale has a shoulder issue, so he's not wrestling. They're both nationally ranked. I saw a ranking this week where Cale was ranked 4th in the nation at 126 pounds, but he not able to go. They're both state champions, so that moving here and having, before those two got here, we had 3 state champions since the sport began in the 65, 66 school year. Dave Hagedorn, 79, grad, Eric Strawn, 82. And then Will Thompson, 94. McKinley was a state finalist as a freshman in 20. Finished second to state. That was our first finalist since Gavin Bradley in 95. So we went a long time, nobody even making the finals. So Seabolt coming in, now they both won. Cale's won 2 state titles, one for West Fork and Sheffield, then he transferred here and he won for us in February. McKinley, through his junior year of high school, that's 3 years high school, has been in the state finals 3 years. He won once and he's been second twice. Those are, in our program, unprecedented. And Cale moved here because of Seabolt Wrestling Academy. He lives with the Seabolt family. They both have aspirations to be collegiate Division I, the highest division wrestlers, and I believe they will attain those goals.
And just beyond those 2 wrestlers, I mean, I appreciate you placing their accomplishments in historical context here, but beyond them, when you see the Seabolt Wrestling Academy students or athletes that are here, you see them running all over town now. I mean, they're all out, jogging to start their workouts. And they're coming from multiple states.
Everywhere.
In here. I mean, it's amazing to see it.
Yeah, that's because TJ is regarded as one of the top club wrestling coaches in the United States.
And tell us again, why did he land that academy here?
He was in Mason City and rented a facility at Nyack. And he expanded to Ames and rented a facility there, and he wanted to own. And Brent Denhart was a Seabolt Academy wrestler, and perhaps still is. Brent's had some injury issues. And McKinley was a Seabolt Academy wrestler, so they made the 2-hour drive to Mason City how many times a week. And TJ, the way I heard it, just made it known they were looking to buy somewhere. And the Schroeders had moved to Arkansas, had the, I can't even think of what it was called.
Fieldhouse.
I think it was G&M grocery.
Yeah,
That's what it was when I moved here. So yeah, the field house was empty, and so they looked at
Just stop and think about that a minute. Think of the economic impact. I mean, we don't necessarily think of that as a business here in Greene County, but oh my goodness, it sure is. It's not only
money here.
It's not only a business; it's a destination.
So there's a young man that's going to be a senior at Southeast Polk, who a year ago placed 3rd in the Junior World Wrestling Championships, and he trains here. He's not only a national champion; he's a world medalist on down. I mean, that's how significant in the sport of wrestling that Seabolt Wrestling Academy is. And most of those kids aren't old enough to drive, some are, but, you know, their parents brings them here, spends time here, maybe he eats here, gets gasoline here, maybe he loses money at the casino, we love when people do that. And, yeah, it's significant.
Probably do us all well to be dropping a note to TJ, and what's his wife's name?
I don't know, I've never met his wife.
I've met her, she's a really nice person. He's got 2 little girls, and at least the older of the 2 is a hellacious little wrestler.
She got second at the Big Tulsa tournament last fall.
Imagine that.
So anyway,
But my point was, it'd probably do us all well to drop a note to TJ Siebel from time to time.
that's one of the more recent, you know, I mean, I think that's big.
Anything else historic in this 3-year period that we should address sports-wise?
Again, for me, I think there are a couple of things, again, they won't jump out at everybody's page, but I think the state place winners we've had overall in recent years, especially on the boys' side, but a little bit on the girls' side, you know, it's been since the early to mid-90s, I think, since we've had this many place winners, and I'm talking all sports combined, individual sports combined, wrestling and track and field in particular, we've had a bunch.
And as I think around quickly, I think of the number of D1 athletes that have come out of here in recent times. Danielle Hoyle up at Peyton Churdan. Is Tyler Miller? Tyler Miller at Iowa State playing football. And I mean, many others here in recent times. So,
Yeah.
been a good run. Okay, now, let's jump back.
What time it is right now? We got till 12?
Yes.
Gotta hurry.
What time is it? Doug's got a great wrap-up for us, so don't leave. What time is it?
It's 11:25.
Okay, let's go to what I argue is the best sports story I've heard of in Greene County history. And there aren't very many people around town that would click on this one, but I was amazed with the first time I heard Doug tell this story. And it is it's an inspirational sports story that everybody ought to know about, to the point that we should have a statue around town somewhere about this particular athlete and what he accomplished from a very average start in Greene County. So who are we talking about?
Donald Wilson, who was a athlete here in the 1920s, 1926 graduate. Some of you heard that. You're going to get the abbreviated version, because we got a lot of ground to cover. So Donald was called Speedy Wilson here because he was an athlete and he was fast. And they had a pretty good football team. And he had a dream of playing football at the University of Michigan. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it probably had to do with Fielding Yost was Michigan's coach at that time, and a famous coach. Not maybe quite as famous as Newt Rockne, but he was famous.
And how big was Donald Speedy
In high
Wilson?
school, 5'7", 135. And
Okay.
people weren't as big then, you know, they weren't, but that still wasn't big. 5'7", 135. Gonna go to Michigan. So you say, well, did he know anyone at Michigan? Did he have relatives or anything? I don't think so. I couldn't find anything. He just wanted to go to Michigan. So what do you imagine people here told him when they heard, hey, I'm going to Michigan, I'm going to play football?
Yeah, sure.
No, you're not. Not good enough, not big enough, not fast enough. You know, you're speedy here, but you're nothing there, and all these negative things. So this past spring, I started expanding. I went several years without telling the Donald Wilson story, and this spring I just decided to try to tell it more. So I've been in the Peyton Command schools a couple of times. I've been in our middle school talking about this, and I grouped Donald with Jim Dorn and Nate Toyd and Bryce Pop, and there's probably Doreen Wilbur, and there's some others. And I group it under this theme. Don't let someone else talk you out of your dream. Now, if you get on a path and you decide, you know, that's not what I thought it was going to be, I'm going to change my goals, with, you know, that's one thing. But to let other people talk you out of it, I'm telling kids, don't let anybody do that. Don't let anybody do that. If it's your dream, I'm not going to be easy. You know, maybe you decide it isn't for you, but don't let somebody else make that decision for you. And Donald didn't. So Donald, I found one article where it said Donald rode the rails and hitchhiked to Ann Arbor. And he got there, and there were no red shirting in those days, there was very little recruiting in those days. So anyway, he's on campus, and freshmen couldn't play varsity then. So imagine 5'7", 135. How many ever running backs Michigan had on their team? He was probably the last guy. So imagine what practices were like. Those were the leather helmets, no face guard, no face mask, you know. So he just probably got annihilated. Sophomore year, same thing, never played. Junior year, same thing, never played. Senior year, they played 9 games, 7 games in, never played. They did have some injuries, so they're going to Minnesota in week 8. Raise your hand if you've heard of a former NFL college player named Bronco Nagurski.
Oh, yeah.
Bronco Nagurski was Minnesota's star fullback linebacker. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame, he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and for 30 years he was a pro wrestler. Bronco was one tough, you know what. He's Minnesota's star. They were drawing 34,000 people a game in Minneapolis, and they were 6-1. And Michigan wasn't having a great year by Michigan standards. They were 3-1. Hadn't won a Big Ten game yet. And they drew 55,000 for the Little Brown Jug. And they played for it back then. They still play for it today. The Little Brown Jug, Michigan and Minnesota. So, but he was third string running back even after the injuries. You know, he wouldn't have been a play. And of course, like in the movies, the other guys got hurt and he played. Unlike the movies, he did not score 6 touchdowns. They did not win 100-0. But he did play successfully. He carried 17 times for 59 yards, which is not a huge average, but he didn't throw much in those days. He mostly ran and kept the ball moving forward. They did throw between once they got at Minnesota's 34 and they threw a pass. In Michigan, they called him Little Red. He was red-headed. So he wasn't Speedy anymore, he was Little Red. And they threw a pass to Little Red. And he caught it and got tackled at the 3. They gave it to him, he got to the 1. And their quarterback, those days, single wing quarterback isn't what quarterback is today. But anyway, a guy named Gembus carried the ball over the goal line, 6-6. This was 4th quarter now. And Gembus kicks the extra point and they win. 7-6, they upset Michigan. Michigan upset Minnesota 7-6. And I have copies of the Michigan Daily.
Which you wrote to the university and asked to get into their
I
files.
did, yeah, and I have the letter telling me how much money I owed them for the research I did. And I've got plenty of these if you want one, you can
Oh
shred
my
them.
gosh, yes.
Wolverines upset Gopher team 7-6. Wilson and Gembus are stars as invading varsity outplays Minnesota in all departments. And then the next week, they played the Iowa Hawkeyes, who had a good team. Iowa had lost a close one to Purdue the week before, and Purdue won the Big Ten title. But Iowa was good, and it was at Ann Arbor, and it was 0-0, scoreless tie. The Little Red got to play again, and that was the 9th game. That was it. His career was over. While he was there, some significant events took place. His mother died back here. The Great Depression started about 3 weeks before he played his first college football game, so he graduated in the spring of 1930 during the Great Depression. He had a goal of playing and being a letter winner. He is a letter winner at the University of Michigan. And the whole point, again, we're going much faster than I normally do, is he wouldn't let anyone tell him he couldn't do it. He wouldn't be denied. So it was 100 years ago, almost, but it'd be a million years ago. People still had goals. Maybe a million years ago it was to make fire. But they still had goals, right? Everyone has goals, dreams, things they want to do, succeed, be good at. And, he bulked up at Michigan. He was 5'7", 135 here in high school. Senior year at Michigan, 5'7", 140. So,
Don, have you heard this story before?
No, I haven't.
Just let me bounce this off of you. How does that story strike you when you think of sports stories in Greene County? How does it strike you?
It's once again some of the flavor of our chats, and we briefly mentioned it yesterday. And Doug's going down basically the same idea, is that, you know, we here in Greene County, and we've talked about this earlier, have got a wealth of sports stars and musicians, probably more than any place else in the state. I mean, for a small county, and you know, here we go back to the 20s, and we have an outstanding star.
It's hard to think of this, something beating this story, I think. Go ahead.
Well, I just wondered who was his family? The Wilson?
Yeah, I got that somewhere. I don't know if I wrote his dad's name down. I think I have it somewhere. But his dad was a Ford dealer and then an insurance person. His dad died here as well some years later. And Donald did not live to be very old. He died in 1962, which was about 60 years ago. He lived most of his adult life in northern New Hampshire. The only thing I could really find, well, I couldn't really find, again, paid the Michigan Bentley Library to find, but he was on his small northern New Hampshire town's recreation board. And he worked for Portland Cement Company. That's really all I can find. There's a picture of Donald.
Wow. I think we're indebted to you for just doing the research on that story. I mean, and at the time, you didn't do much with it for a while, did you?
Not a lot. I mean, I think I probably wrote an article, but no, not a lot.
Amazing. Others that, actually we could go into your Hillman if you want to here, because we want to cover other historic figures in sports, especially, or historic stories. Is there anything else that we need to cover before we get into your who's who of
The lightning round?
yeah.
Playing a lightning round again. Yeah, you all get to play along. Yeah, so there are some people I want to make sure that. So I mentioned earlier Jim Dorn and Nate Toyd and Bryce Pop and Dorian Wilbur. One of the things, again, they all had huge odds stacked against them. Huge odds. Jim Dorn from Beaver didn't have football. He didn't have football. He went to BV. He got cut from the team because he was too slow. He played on Detroit Lions' last two NFL championship teams. I'll tell you how bad Detroit's been in the last 70 years. In the early 50s, and he was a speedy receiver and defensive back, but he was too slow in Storm Lake, Iowa. I think maybe they missed on that one.
Transferred to Iowa State.
Yeah.
And
Transferred to
really
Iowa
developed
State.
at Iowa State.
Yeah, all Big Six, and got drafted, played, and he was an All-Pro, and 2 championships, and all that from Beaver, Iowa, that didn't have football. What were the odds against him? He wouldn't quit. He wouldn't be denied. Nate Toyd, 94 Peyton Sherdane graduate, 6'7", left-handed pitcher, good pitcher. Class 1A at Peyton Sherdane. It's Class 1A at Peyton Sherdane. What are the odds against him, though? Pretty high. But he went to Iowa State. They recruited him. He pitched for 3 years, and the Cubs drafted him, I think, in the 6th round. He was in the Cubs system. He got traded in 2002. He made his major league debut with then the Florida Marlins, now the Miami Marlins. And he had 2 major league appearances. One start against Milwaukee, which he lost, and one relief appearance against the Phillies in Miami. The game at Milwaukee was in Wisconsin. And then he spent 11 total years as a professional pitcher, mostly in AAA. But he had 2 major league appearances. Now you know, he was told 1,000 times he wasn't good enough.
And I think we established he's the only Major League
It's
Baseball.
the only one I've been able to find. There have been some minor leaguers. I've not been able to find another player from Greene County that appeared in a Major League game. He was in 2. And now he's the president of the, Des Moines Buccaneers amateur hockey team. He's the club president. Yeah, odds were way against him. Bryce Pop, oh my God. How high were the odds stacked against him? Scranton, last Scranton team on its own. I had some friends go to that game, their last game on their own. When they called for the punt team, one guy went in, one guy came out. They suited 12. Before 8 players. That's not even very many for 8 players. So anyway, wasn't recruited. His longtime wife Denise was a year older. She went to high school here. She went to UNI. Told the coaches, "Hey, my boyfriend's good." You know, how many times did they hear that? "Hey, my boyfriend's a good player. You ought to go talk to him." Well, they bothered to go talk to him. "Oh, might have something there." Of course, an All-American at UNI, drafted by the Packers, and then Panthers to Packers. And then, 5 years there, 3 in Buffalo, NFL Defensive Player of the Year, 1996, 2 years in Jacksonville, 1 with the Vikings, and then he retired from pro football. 11-year career from Scranton, Iowa, that had 12 players on his team. As he ended his high school career, was virtually unrecruited. Had he not dated Denise, who knows? he may have never left Greene County, which would be good for Greene County. But
I'm amending my ideas for the sculpture. It's going to now be called Against All Odds.
Yeah.
It's going to be Donald Speedy Wilson, Bryce Pop, all these people we've just heard their stories, Doreen Wilbur. I mean, all these incredible performances against all odds.
yeah, big odds against them. So I want to read you a couple things. One is kind of neat from we've had high school football here since October of 1898. And I'm going to read you something from that, and I'm going to read you something Doreen wrote. So Doreen was 1972 Olympic medalist in women's archery, the first
Gold
time we held that gold medalist in 72. And it's easy to forget some things that happened. But that's when the Israeli team members were murdered.
Yeah.
Doreen wrote this, and this was published in 1997, and I'm not even sure what it was published in. It just at the end says, by Doreen. The killing of the Israeli athletes was a terrible thing to have been so close to. Our archery team was a couple of blocks from where the Israeli wrestlers' rooms were, and the killings began. We couldn't believe that something like that could happen at the Olympic Games. And this was the event that was supposed to create goodwill and make new friends from all nations. Our friend from Puerto Rico got the bus that we traveled to and from the practice field in. He came to take us away from the village. He lived in the same building as the Israeli wrestlers. We walked up the mound made from rubble from the war. I presume that's World War II. We watched from there when they took the rest of the wrestlers to the airport. We later learned they'd killed 11 athletes. A memorial for the Israeli wrestlers was the next day, 1 day before our archery competition was to begin. It was very hard to get back into the spirit of the reason we came to Munich. The mental training that athletes need to concentrate and block things out for days. We had a good tournament, good weather, and men's and women's gold. The town of Jefferson gave me a wonderful homecoming. Many of them met me at the Des Moines airport when I arrived. The next day they had a parade and let school out. What a nice ending. 7 long weeks by Doreen.
I've never heard that before. Never seen it. Wow.
And something that's amazing is that, of course, communications were not great at that time, and Skeeter is back here in Jefferson while all of this is going on, and no way to
What's he thinking?
no way to communicate back
Yeah.
and forth.
Oh my gosh.
He could see the news, but couldn't communicate with Doreen.
Okay, the Doug Rieder lightning round. Are we ready for this yet?
Not quite. I got to share a couple other things with you.
Okay.
How much time is that?
We got plenty of time.
Okay. So one of my favorite athletes here from Altima, and I got to meet him when he was probably mid to upper 80s, is Joe Rogers. Joe Rogers graduated from here in 1930, so he's just a little bit younger than Donald Wilson, who's 1 year older than Fred Moraine. They were on the same track teams here. So Joe was a state champion 100-yard dash sprinter here. And his last 2 years of football, high school football here, he was in star, running back, star player. They were 9-0-0. You had ties in those days.
Wow.
And they were 7-0-2 the 900 year, 1928, they were unscored upon. We had the 1952, untied, unscored upon team. Well, they had one earlier than that, in 28.
Really?
Yeah. And then in 29, they got tied twice, didn't lose. So they were 8-0-2. They played 10 games. They had 9 shutouts that year. So in 2 years, they had 18 shutouts. And Joe was one of the stars of that team. I'm going to skip some paragraphs to get through this. He coached at Manning, Rockwell City, and Mason City in Iowa before taking a step eastward to coach football at Benton Harbor, Michigan. In his first season, he guided Benton Harbor to his first victory over arch rival Muskegon in 20 years. That was 1946. Coached until 1957 when he became athletic director, post he held until retiring. Skipping down, he was instrumental in founding a foundation, a charitable foundation. Joe Rogers did that, and that's the kind of person he was. That organization's been a leader in the fight against drug and alcohol abuse among young people and working toward anything positive for youth. Joe not only was a successful coach, but, and this is their writing, a man named Jack Moss from the Kalamazoo Gazette in 1997, Joe was 87 at the time, is a living legend in Michigan prep sports. Although his personal saga started in Iowa, there was a gifted high school athlete who achieved greatness at William Penn College in Oskaloosa. He was good enough in track to be invited to compete in the great relays. And he's a member of the William Penn College Hall of Fame, as well as the Michigan High School Coaches Association, Michigan Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association, and Michigan High School Football Coaches Association Halls of Fame. He's in all of those Halls of Fame. He graduated from here in 1930. I got to meet him. He used to have, during one football game, we'd invite people that once in a while we still do it, but for a while there we did it every year. And Joe came back, and he was well into his 80s, and he had a traveling nurse that had to be with him, but I got to meet and talk with Joe Rogers.
Wow.
I still believe he's one of the, not only greatest athletes, but one of the greatest human beings that maybe we've ever produced.
Astounding.
Yeah, Joe Rogers. They won the 880 state title, qualified for a national meet in Chicago. I read about the national meet. Now imagine this. Of course, it was rock track. We didn't have synthetic surfaces almost 100 years ago. They didn't have lane lines for an 880 race. 4 guys running 220 yards each. Talk about demo derby. You didn't have to stay in your lane. That's the time. It meant something about, there was quite a bit of maneuvering and juggling about. Yeah. So anyway.
Amazing.
Joe, yeah, I just always admired Joe Rogers' story. Just fantastic. The other guy I want to make sure I mention is Jack Smith. Some of you knew Jack. Jack graduated from here in 42. How many rounds of golf did you play with Jack? Lots. Jack loved to play golf. Jack was an outstanding athlete here. He was All-State in football. We only picked one All-State team back in those days. We only had one class. If you were All-State, even like 7th team All-State, you were pretty good, right? He was All-State in basketball. They had a state pentathlon back then. He won that for the state of Iowa. He briefly played basketball at Drake University, and then he was World War II then, and he joined the service. And he was a decorated serviceman in the European theater. Came back here, was in the insurance business for decades. Right? He was probably 57 or 58 when I moved here. I admire his story. He served our country. He was a tremendous athlete. Did he ever beat you in a golf club? Yes, he did? He must have been a tremendous golf player to beat you. Yeah. So I want to make sure I mention those guys and his sons, Bruce and Taylor, were fantastic basketball players. Was Bruce a freshman, maybe, Chris, when you were a senior?
Yeah.
That's,
Jack's my uncle.
yeah, Jack's his
Jack's your
uncle.
uncle.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Bruce's junior year,
Bruce was a sophomore.
sophomore, he averaged 19.3 rebounds.
Oh, my
Again.
goodness.
Didn't go out his senior year, and then when he got into the guitar music, then I think he was still Smith at that time, and later changed to Bannister and so. But that's, as I do research, I think, okay, yeah, 18 points a game, 19.3 rebounds a game. So do you write your teammates thank you notes for being such poor shots? You get that many rebound opportunities?
That's astounding.
Yeah, it's a huge number, huge number. Okay, so lightning round?
Yep.
All right.
This is a new deal.
So I've got names in the hat, and you're gonna draw a name, and then, I don't know if I have as many names, or we have people, might be close, so just draw one and pass it around, and then we'll go around, and you holler out, and I'll tell you something about it.
Everybody gets one.
Everybody gets one.
Everybody's a winner.
Doug,
Yeah.
while they're getting ready to do this, have you considered doing a book or doing any kind of,
Well-
probably as close as we've come to, if we could pull together our archives of video stuff here, you're probably as close as we've come so far to doing your story.
I haven't considered it, but you have, so maybe we'll talk later, I don't know.
And let me ask you, this is your 44th year?
Yeah, I moved here in May of '79, so
So
43
44
plus, yep. in my
43 plus years of covering sports in Greene County.
Yeah.
And have you got career plans? I mean, are you gonna continue doing this indefinitely? What are your plans?
Yeah, I'm a salesperson for Raccoon Valley Radio, and I'm also a sports person for Greene County High School Sports. So the plan is that I will relinquish my sales duties at the end of calendar year 2022, and I will maintain my sports duties.
Excellent.
That's the plan.
Well, you've been a great service to this county in so many ways over the, and I often wonder how many events you emceed over all these years. I know it must be hundreds.
Yeah, it's a few, I don't know.
Okay, this is the lightning round. So how do you want to just point at somebody to start them off? Or?
Are there any left?
I go.
Okay, we'll start with you, Don,
Start
then
with
we'll go
you,
to
Don.
mine.
Omega Wise.
Omega Wise. So Omega graduated, I'm thinking about 20 years ago, from Jefferson Standard. She qualified for the girls' state track meet in the 800 meters. They take 24 girls in each class, and there are 4 classes of size schools. We were in the second to the largest at that time. She was the 12th qualified. And I remember thinking, God, I wish she would have been 13th, because she would have been the fastest of the second heat. Or it's the first heat. They run the slow heat first and then the fast heat. Because sometimes the person who wins the slow heat can run fast enough to be a place winner. At that time, you had to be top 6 to get a medal. Now you have to be top 8. But she was 12th. So I'm thinking, it's nice, but she's going to be 11th or 12th in her heat. So we're 1 lap into the 2-lap race. She's in second place. I'm waiting for the bear to jump on her back, because she's running way faster, and she's running like 4 or 5 seconds faster than she's ever run. Senior year, last meet.
And this is state meet.
State meet,
Okay.
Drake Stadium. Now we're 200 meters to go. She's in second place. We're 100 meters to go. She's in second place. And with about 60 to go, she gets passed by one girl and finishes third. And runs 2:21, which is not world-class time, but it's our school record by 4 seconds. And I have never forgotten that. What an amazing performance. She found that one time, her last race, and she just outdid anything she's ever done before.
Wow.
Amazing story.
Adam Jones?
Adam Jones. So many of us know Adam, Sid, and Linda, the family. So Adam was always a great athlete, great basketball player, great at whatever he did athletically, and good in academics. So he could have been an invited walk-on in men's basketball at the University of Northern Iowa, and instead chose to go to Division III, which is non-scholarship basketball at Buena Vista University. And so all Adam did was lead the Beavers to 3 NCAA appearances, a Sweet 16 appearance, and in his senior year in '02, he was named the Jostens, the jewelry company, the ring company Jostens, the National Division III Player of the Year. The National Player of the Year. From Jefferson, Iowa. There are like 300 and some Division III schools in the United States. He was named the National Player of the Year. He's now a very successful girls basketball coach at Dallas Center Grimes. And his son Jackson played on their boys state title team just this past month.
And is committed to Buena Vista.
And
I was teaching at Buena Vista during Adam's career up there, and it was, oh my God, it was so fun. Basketball was never more fun than that.
yes, sir.
The Sawhill family.
The
Yeah.
Sawhill family, okay.
So Mark and Mavis still live here. They're the parents. Their kids, Lillian was little when they moved here, and I don't even think John Michael was born yet. So Mavis coached the 1994 Girls State Track and Field Championship team. It's the only Jefferson-based team championship that we've ever had. She was the coach of that. Mark was a long-time football line coach, assistant coach, head baseball coach for many years, head wrestling coach for many years. Lillian was on the last Jefferson Scranton volleyball team that made it to state. She was the state runner-up in the discus throw in track and field. John Michael was the first team All-State lineman in football. He was a state place winner in wrestling, and he was a state place winner in the shot put. They were good.
Incredible.
They were really good. Ted?
Keith Peterson.
Keith Peterson, attorney here, graduated in '04, great athlete, basketball all-state player. We were in the African River Conference then, one of the smaller schools in the league. We had a chance to win the conference title at Carroll, against Carroll, and we had a late lead and we blew the lead. They tied it up late. We had a few seconds left. Simeon Lang, who also lives here, he was on the baseline, threw a football-type pass down the floor to Keith, who caught it somewhere around the top of the key on the other end of the floor. There was a Carroll guy back there. Keith took 2 dribbles. Carroll guy saw what was coming, kind of did the Olay, went to the side. Keith slam dunked it. The buzzer sounded, and we won the conference title.
I've seen the replay of that. It was phenomenal.
He went on to have a great basketball career at Central College, led the NCAA Division III in shooting percentage. He made 75% of his shots his senior year. And he was a 3-time place winner in the high jump course, placed third three years in a row at state, and he was a Drake Relays runner-up in the high jump.
Wow.
Phenomenal.
Carol.
And he's what, 6 foot?
6', 7-ish, somewhere in there.
The Kennedy Fagan family.
Yeah, so
Say it again.
Kennedys and Fagans. So there's a lot of Kennedys between Grand Junction and Jefferson and so on. And part of the Kennedys are the Fagans. And so I don't know every single one, and I don't know the whole family tree, but the 10,000-foot view is that I mentioned that East Greene State boys basketball team in '82. Well, Jim Kennedy was the main cog of that leading scorer, fantastic player. Bud Fagan is married to Pat, who was a Kennedy. So Annie is their daughter. She's the principal of Peyton Sheridan. She was a good athlete for East Greene, played basketball at Buena Vista. And her younger brother, kind of sort of transferred here from East Greene when he was a junior. And he did transfer her here. Story for another time. He made his first 8 shots at Carlisle one night, and all were 3-pointers.
Oh my God.
Hadn't seen anything like that in high school. I don't even think Adam Jones did that in high school. I saw him do it in college once, but in high school.
And what was this Fagan? What was his name?
Brett.
Brett Fagan.
Right. And so that was about 02, somewhere around there. So anyway, and they have many. I mean, Tom Kennedy is related to them, our softball coach. There's all the Kennedys, and again, I don't know the whole family tree, but if you added it together, it would be pretty significant.
David.
Chris Kernan Tagadorn.
Yeah. So Tim Bunz was her high school throwing coach. here in the early 90s. She's a 94 Jefferson grad. He's been trying for years to get her in to the track and field coaches Hall of Fame. And I got word about a month ago she's going in. And he's tried for years. She's a 3-time high school state champion in the discus throw for us. She was a shot put runner-up. She was a multiple-time throw All-American at Iowa State in all conference in the, at that time, the Big Eight. Multiple All-American and great softball player. Could pitch, could hit the ball, crazy, good basketball player, volleyball, just anything. Tore an ACL, came back from that to finish her high school career. Just the nicest person ever. She, this winter, was inducted into the Greene County High School Athletic Hall of Fame. She lives in Adel, and just a tremendous person, but what an athlete.
I don't recognize this name, Todd Cleverly.
Many people won't. Todd's deceased.
Say his name again.
Todd Cleverly.
Okay.
So I put Todd on the list for a couple of reasons. He won 2 100-meter dash state titles in 84 and 85 in Class 3A, and the 200-meter dash also in 85 when he was a senior. Todd was not always the fastest runner. Todd just won. He was one of those athletes where he won the race. You look at his time, you might not be impressed. He won the race. You just, you know, there are people like that. He just did what it took to win. He had some issues in his life, and he's gone way too early. And I think a life lesson, you know, he was a great runner, a great sprinter. But
The Kinney family.
Kinney, well, boy, we have 2.5 days. So here's the quick, how much time do we have?
It's about 1 minute.
1 minute, so really quick, Christy Kinney Hayes and her son's in the NBA, and Kyle Kinney, who's in our school system, and he was a good athlete, and Sam Kinney, she played on girls basketball teams here, she scored, I think it was 32 points, we beat defending state champion Carroll, with her 32 points, and then they went on to win again, the second title, that same year that we beat them because of her 32 points, and she was a great all-around athlete, and then Reed Kinney, a great baseball player on our semifinal state baseball team in '98, and then on our '99 football team, which is perhaps one of the most famous that we've had, that beat Harlan and Harlan, so on. He was a tight end on that team, so just a tremendous athletic family. You gotta go quick.
The Pop family.
The Pop family, yeah. Again, just with all you got all the cousins and all the brothers and all everything. Just fabulous. Multiple state titles, just, you know, in Bryce, NFL, and just the whole thing.
The Wall family.
Yeah, so Jerry was our principal here for many years. The late Jerry Waugh again went too soon. Certainly Tricia Waugh-Pitkins started for C. Vivian Stringer in basketball at the University of Iowa, the Hall of Famer C. Vivian Stringer. Career cut short due to a heel injury. She has a son that plays offensive line in the NFL. So,
I'm getting prouder by the moment. Chris?
Doug McDermott.
What do you know about her?
Allison Drury, 94 grad, same class as Chris Kernan. I saw Noel this morning. She's living in Boston, and I said, does she have a northeastern accent? He goes, no. I said, good. She's a Midwest, rural Iowa girl. She can live there, but don't turn her into one of them. The Burchards with him, and Larry goes, I talked to her. No, I don't think she has an accent. Good. She was the state champion in the 100 meters her senior year. She was the Drake Relays champion in the 100 meters her senior year. Battle
Say her
feet
name again.
Allison Drury.
Oh, yeah, okay.
D-R-E-W-R-Y. And she was a great sprinter, and she would have been even greater. She had feet problems, you know, that bothered her, and that's not good for a track and field runner. Or she would have had more athletes, but she won those things. And in those days, girls had to qualify to go into Drake Stadium for the Drake Relays. They had to run at Ankeny High School, and only the top 8 made it to Drake. And I did not remember this. Noel told me she qualified in lane 1, which means she was the 7th fastest qualifier out of 8. And she won the race.
Amazing.
At Drake.
Amazing.
Doug,
Ball family?
yeah, so T-ball, longtime wrestling coach. Briefly boys track coach here. His sons Luke and Marty and Jake were good athletes for us. Scotty was not an athlete, but certainly has talents of his own. That family has numerous all-state awards and state tournaments and all those things, and T-ball coaching all those years. And he was a two-time state wrestling champion at New Hampton High School. He played at Northern Illinois. He wrestled and played football at Waldorf when he was a junior college. Then he went and was a linebacker at Northern Illinois. And so that family, again, when you add it all together, pretty impressive.
Well, Doug, this has been phenomenal. These are lessons that are not only interesting just from a historical standpoint, but my gosh, the lessons involved in the stories of our athletes through all the decades, over all the time, is just really impressive. And I appreciate you taking time to share that with kids today, because those stories are not getting told frequently enough. And we'll get going on that sculpture. So thank you for taking your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for hanging in over